Some scenes made movie history, but left the actors wishing they'd never done them. From emotional breakdowns to unsafe stunts and roles they now regret entirely, these 20 movie moments pushed boundaries too far. What happens when the camera stops rolling and reality sets in? You'll be surprised by what these stars had to say after the fact. Stick around, because the regrets only get more shocking as the list goes on. Sharon Stone, the scene she never agreed to. When Basic Instinct hit theaters in 1992, Sharon Stone became an overnight sensation. The film's most talked-about moment, her infamous interrogation scene, launched her into the stratosphere of fame. But what audiences didn't know at the time was that Stone never agreed to reveal quite that much. According to Stone, she was told during filming that the lighting and camera angles would obscure any explicit visuals. But during a screening of the final cut, surrounded by producers and executives, she realized she had been lied to. "I slapped the director, left the room, and called my lawyer," she later said in her memoir. The betrayal hit hard. That one scene, though iconic, came at the cost of her trust and personal boundaries. It wasn't just a question of artistic freedom. It was about consent. The moment may have helped cement her career, but Stone has said it also changed the way people saw her. Roles that came after often focused on sexuality, not skill. And personally, she felt that something private had been taken from her. Stone's story became one of Hollywood's most infamous examples of an actor losing control over their own image. And, as it turns out, she wasn't alone. The next actress on this list paid a painful physical price for trusting the wrong people behind the camera. Uma Thurman, crashing for a take. By the time Kill Bill Vol. 2 was being filmed, Uma Thurman had already proven herself as an actress who could do it all. Intensity, vulnerability, action. But one behind-the-scenes decision during that film would leave her physically and emotionally scarred. In one scene, Thurman was asked to drive a convertible down a dirt road at high speed. She didn't feel safe. The car had issues, the terrain was tricky, and she told the crew she didn't want to do it. But according to her, the director pressured her, telling her the shot needed to be real. So she did it. The car crashed. Thurman suffered permanent neck and knee injuries. At the time, she kept quiet. It wasn't until years later that she went public with the story, revealing how betrayed she felt. Footage of the crash was even withheld from her until she fought to get it released. "I was deeply hurt, physically and emotionally. I was coerced into doing something unsafe, and I'll never forget that." Her relationship with the director never fully recovered, and the experience changed the way she approached future roles, making safety and personal boundaries her top priority. And while Uma's story is about physical harm, the next one is more psychological. An actress who felt her most famous role still haunts her today. Kate Winslet, forever remembered for one frame, Titanic, made Kate Winslet a global star. The romance, the heartbreak, the unforgettable chemistry with Leonardo DiCaprio, audiences around the world fell in love. But there's one scene from that movie that Winslet wishes she could erase. It's the moment where Jack sketches Rose, completely nude, except for that legendary necklace. The image became one of the most famous in cinematic history. But for Winslet, it's been an uncomfortable legacy. In interviews over the years, she's admitted that she never imagined just how often people would bring it up. "I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to sign that still. It's awkward. It's not something I'm proud of." The way fans, and even journalists, focus on that scene undermines her work in the rest of the film. It's not the character's depth, or the emotional weight she carried, just the image. She's since made a conscious effort to avoid roles involving nudity. The scene may have made movie history, but it left a mark she didn't want. Coming up, another major star who went from wearing the cape to wanting to bury the movie altogether. George Clooney, the Batman he wants to forget. When George Clooney put on the cape and cowl for Batman and Robin, it seemed like a sure thing. Big budget, beloved character, major star. It had all the ingredients of a blockbuster. But what ended up on screen was something entirely different. The film was a critical disaster. With its over-the-top colors, awkward one-liners, and infamous bat nipples on the costume, it quickly became one of the most mocked superhero movies ever made, and no one took more of the blame than Clooney. Looking back, Clooney has never shied away from his regret. "I always apologize for that movie. It was a mess." He's even joked about trying to convince people not to watch it. But the regret runs deeper than just embarrassment. Clooney has admitted that the role almost derailed his career. For a while, studios didn't see him as a serious actor. He had to fight to regain credibility, choosing indie films and dramatic roles to prove he was more than a pretty face in a rubber suit. It worked. Clooney reinvented himself, but the memory of Batman and Robin still lingers. And if Clooney's regret was about the wrong role, the next one is about the right role, but the wrong scene, and how it crossed a line for the actress involved. Jennifer Lawrence, the love scene that brought guilt. Jennifer Lawrence had already won an Oscar and become a household name by the time she starred in Passengers. But one scene in the film, her first major love scene, left her rattled in ways she hadn't expected. The issue wasn't the scene itself, it was what it required emotionally. Lawrence had to perform an intimate moment with co-star Chris Pratt, who was married at the time. She later revealed that the scene triggered intense anxiety and guilt. It was the first time she'd crossed that line on screen, and she wasn't prepared for how it would feel. "I got really drunk before shooting. That was my way of dealing with it." After the scene was done, she said she was racked with self-doubt and emotional discomfort. She questioned whether it was necessary, whether it honored her boundaries, and whether she'd ever want to do something like that again. The experience stuck with her. In future roles, Lawrence became more vocal about her comfort level, setting clear limits on how far she was willing to go. The scene may have looked seamless on screen, but for her, it was one of the hardest moments of her career. And next, we shift from emotional pain to creative regret. An actor who knew from the start that the role just wasn't right for him. Dev Patel, a role he knew wasn't right. When Slumdog Millionaire became a global sensation, Dev Patel was thrust into the spotlight. He had never even auditioned for a feature film before, but suddenly, he was the face of a modern cinematic fairy tale. Hollywood came knocking, eager to make him their next breakout star. And in 2010, he accepted a lead role in M. Night Shyamalan's live-action adaptation of The Last Airbender. It was a decision he would come to deeply regret. Patel played Zuko, the tormented prince with a scarred face and a fiery temper. But for fans of the original animated series, the film was a disaster. Critics slammed it for poor performances, wooden dialogue, and a complete misunderstanding of what made the source material beloved. Patel knew he wasn't at his best. He later admitted he didn't feel connected to the character or even the project as a whole. "I didn't know what I was doing," he confessed in a candid interview years later. "I didn't feel like I was giving anything. I didn't enjoy the process." Beyond the performance, Patel also faced backlash for participating in a film accused of whitewashing. The casting choices drew controversy, especially since Patel himself, one of the only actors of color in a major role, felt out of place. That regret wasn't just about how the film was received, it was about a moment in his career when he ignored his instincts. The money was there. The pressure to keep rising was intense. But deep down, He knew this wasn't a role that served his growth as an actor. After The Last Airbender, he took a step back from blockbuster offers and focused on more grounded, character-driven work. And it paid off. Films like Lion and The Green Knight proved he wasn't a one-hit wonder. But the regret of signing onto a project he didn't believe in never left. And sometimes, regret doesn't come from a bad performance. It comes from giving too much of yourself. Just ask Florence Pugh, whose next-level performance left emotional scars that stayed long after cameras stopped rolling. Florence Pugh, breaking herself for the role. Florence Pugh's performance in Midsummer is one of the most haunting portrayals of grief and psychological breakdown in recent memory. She carries the entire film on her shoulders, unraveling in front of our eyes as she sinks deeper into the strange rituals of a sunlit horror cult. The performance earned her critical acclaim, but behind the scenes, it took a devastating toll. The film required Pugh to dive into extreme emotional territory day after day. Her character loses her family in the most horrific way possible, is emotionally manipulated by her boyfriend, and ultimately finds herself completely untethered from reality. And Pugh didn't fake it. She lived it. She cried, screamed, hyperventilated, and then did it again the next day. When filming wrapped, she didn't bounce back like usual. In fact, she couldn't. I remember looking back and feeling like I'd abused myself emotionally, she later said. I'd gone to such dark places and then didn't know how to come back. She explained that after the film ended, she found herself unusually depressed and emotionally raw. It wasn't a breakup or a death. It was the aftershock of losing herself in a character. And though she doesn't regret taking the role, she regrets how unprepared she was for the emotional aftermath. It became a turning point. She began seeking roles that challenged her, but also protected her emotional well-being. It's a powerful reminder that great performances often come at a steep price, one the audience never sees. And speaking of steep prices, Linda Blair's unforgettable role in The Exorcist not only changed horror history, but it changed her life, not always for the better. Linda Blair, possessed by regret. In 1973, The Exorcist shocked the world, and at the center of it all was a 14-year-old Linda Blair, playing the possessed young girl, Regan. The film became a cultural phenomenon, hailed as one of the greatest horror movies ever made. But behind the screams and spinning heads was a teenager who would come to deeply regret what that role did to her life. Blair was thrust into overnight stardom, but the attention was far from glamorous. The physical demands of the film were extreme. She was strapped to harnesses, thrown around on wires, and screamed at by adults for hours on end. She suffered back injuries during one scene when the rig used to simulate violent bed thrashing malfunctioned, causing real damage. But the psychological toll was worse. After the film's release, Blair became a target. She received hate mail. Religious groups called her evil. Tabloids hounded her. And despite being just a child, she was asked to justify the movie's content in adult conversations she didn't fully understand. In later interviews, Blair admitted she had no idea what she was getting into. I was a kid doing what I was told, but afterward, I was left to deal with the consequences alone. The role opened doors professionally, but closed many more emotionally. It took years for Blair to reclaim her sense of self, and to this day, she's cautious about how she discusses the film that made her a legend and nearly broke her. But sometimes, regret doesn't come from what you do on screen. It comes from who you do it with. And that's exactly what happened to Timothée Chalamet when he found himself trapped in a storm far beyond the script. Timothée Chalamet. The director, he couldn't stand by. Timothée Chalamet has been praised as one of the most talented actors of his generation, with performances in Call Me By Your Name, Dune, and Little Women. But in 2019, he found himself at the center of controversy, not because of what he did on screen, but because of who directed it. A Rainy Day in New York, a romantic comedy directed by Woody Allen, featured Chalamet in the leading role. But by the time the film was ready for release, public backlash against Allen had reached a boiling point. Allegations of sexual abuse, long denied but never forgotten, had resurfaced, and Hollywood was split. Chalamet quickly distanced himself from the project. He refused to promote the film and announced that he would be donating his entire salary to charity. "I don't want to profit from my work on this film," he said. "I made a mistake." The decision was rare for such a young actor. He didn't blame the script or the studio. He took responsibility for being part of something that no longer aligned with his values. Though A Rainy Day in New York quietly came and went, the regret stuck. It became a cautionary tale of what happens when promising careers collide with controversy, and the importance of knowing who you're aligning yourself with, even early on. And while Chalamet's regret was about association, the next actor on our list made a choice that cost him an Oscar and possibly the next phase of his entire career. Burt Reynolds, the Oscar that slipped away. Burt Reynolds was once one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. With hits like Smokey and The Bandit and Deliverance, he defined charm and charisma for an entire era. But behind the swagger, there was one decision he never stopped kicking himself for, and it all came down to the role he didn't take. In the early 80s, Reynolds was offered the lead in Terms of Endearment, a deeply emotional drama that would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. The role eventually went to Jack Nicholson, who won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Why did Reynolds say no? Loyalty. He was already committed to shooting Stroker Ace, a goofy action comedy about a race car driver. Reynolds felt indebted to the film's director and co-star, so he turned down the prestige project. Stroker Ace flopped hard. Critics panned it, audiences shrugged, and Reynolds watched the Oscars from his living room. Years later, he admitted the truth. "It was the worst mistake I ever made in my career." The regret wasn't just about the awards, it was about what it cost him professionally. His career began to cool after that, and he spent the next decade trying to reclaim the momentum he'd lost. In Hollywood, timing is everything, and for Reynolds, the wrong movie at the wrong time became the defining regret of a legendary career. Zac Efron, trapped by teen stardom. Zac Efron was catapulted to global fame as Troy Bolton in Disney's High School Musical series. With his boyish charm, athletic build, and golden voice, he became the face of teen romance and clean-cut ambition. For a while, it seemed like he had it all: fame, fans, and a future paved in red carpet gold. But beneath the surface, Efron was struggling with something deeper, a loss of identity. Years after the musical franchise ended, Efron opened up about how the role that made him also boxed him in. "I stepped back and realized I was acting like someone I wasn't," he confessed in an interview. The constant pressure to maintain a wholesome image, sing on cue, and smile through every press tour chipped away at his sense of self. The biggest regret wasn't just the films, it was how long he felt stuck inside that character. Casting directors couldn't see past Troy. Critics dismissed his early attempts at more serious roles. Even audiences seemed reluctant to let him grow up. It took years and a few misfires for Efron to start reclaiming his career. He shifted to dramatic indie projects, experimented with gritty characters, and even poked fun at his own image in self-aware comedies. Slowly, he proved that he wasn't just a teen idol, he was an actor with depth. Still, he looks back at High School Musical with mixed feelings. It was a blessing and a curse. I loved the fans, but I hated not being able to be myself. And while Efron's regret was about being boxed in, the next actor on this list has spent decades wrestling with a role that pushed boundaries he now wishes he hadn't crossed. Mark Wahlberg, a performance he now rejects. When Boogie Nights hit theaters in 1997, it marked a turning point for Mark Wahlberg. No longer just the face of a Calvin Klein ad or the voice behind Good Vibrations, he was suddenly considered a serious actor. Playing Dirk Diggler, a fictional porn star in the golden age of adult films, Wahlberg delivered a raw, daring performance that stunned critics and fans alike. But years later, he's not so proud of it. In interviews, Wahlberg has said he hopes God forgives him for doing Boogie Nights. While he acknowledges the film's artistic merit, he's also been open about how uncomfortable he feels looking back at the explicit material and the lifestyle it portrayed. On one hand, the film launched his acting career in earnest. On the other, it's something he wishes he could erase from his resume. Wahlberg, who has become increasingly vocal about his Catholic faith and personal transformation, views the film as a relic of a version of himself he no longer recognizes. "I did things I'm not proud of," he admitted. "That movie's part of that." Unlike some actors who distance themselves from roles due to public backlash or controversy, Wahlberg's regret is internal. It's about who he was when he took the role and who he's trying to be now. Next, we turn to another actor who took on a role during one of the darkest times in his personal life, a decision he now views as a painful reminder of who he used to be. Gary Oldman, when the role got the worst of him. Gary Oldman is known for disappearing into his roles: Churchill, Dracula, Sid Vicious. But in the mid-90s, while filming The Scarlet Letter opposite Demi Moore, Oldman was disappearing into something far more destructive: addiction. Oldman was drinking heavily, often arriving to set hungover or completely intoxicated. His behavior was erratic, his temper short. The film itself was a critical and commercial failure, but for Oldman, the real regret wasn't the script. It was how he treated others and himself during the shoot. He later admitted to being unprofessional, apologizing publicly to Moore and the crew. In retrospect, he saw the film not just as a bad career choice, but a cry for help. It was one of the projects that finally forced him to face his demons. "The alcohol was killing me," he later confessed. "I lost myself." Oldman would eventually get sober and go on to deliver some of the most celebrated performances of his generation. But The Scarlet Letter stands as a haunting reminder of a time when his talent was being drowned by his addiction. The role may not have been the worst on paper, but for Oldman, it represented rock bottom. And while his regret came from within, the next actor's regret came from the world outside, from cultural backlash so intense it followed him for years. Ahmad Khan Mahmoodzada, One Scene, Lifelong Consequences. Ahmad Khan Mahmoodzada was just a child when he starred in The Kite Runner, a powerful drama based on Khaled Hosseini's best-selling novel. His performance as Hassan, a loyal young boy in war-torn Afghanistan, was heartbreaking and authentic. But one scene changed everything, for him and for his family. In a pivotal moment, Mahmoodzada's character is assaulted. The scene was necessary to the story, but it sparked massive backlash in his home country. Viewers in Afghanistan were outraged, not just at the film, but at Mahmoodzada himself. He was threatened, harassed, and forced into hiding. He later said he was not fully informed of how the scene would be filmed or perceived. As a minor, he relied on adults to protect him, but the cultural fallout was brutal. His family reportedly had to flee the country for safety. Unlike some of the actors on this list, Mahmoodzada didn't regret the performance itself. He regretted the consequences, being vilified for portraying a victim, being thrust into political and cultural controversy, and having his future in acting cut short by fear. What should have been the start of a promising career became a source of pain and trauma. And sometimes that's what regret is, not about the scene itself, but about how the world responds to it. Which brings us to a pop star turned reluctant actress who never wanted to be in her movie at all. Kelly Clarkson, forced into a flop. Before she was a Grammy-winning powerhouse and beloved talk show host, Kelly Clarkson was just a girl with a dream and a contract. After winning the first season of American Idol, Clarkson was contractually obligated to star in a movie. That movie was From Justin to Kelly, and it's safe to say she's never gotten over it. The beach-themed musical was a critical disaster, filled with cheesy dance numbers, awkward dialogue, and zero chemistry between its leads. Clarkson has called it absolutely horrible and revealed that she begged to be released from the obligation. I cried. I didn't want to do it, but her contract left no room for escape. So she showed up, did the job, and watched in horror as it was panned by nearly every critic in America. The experience made her wary of Hollywood, and even made her question whether she wanted to act at all. In hindsight, Clarkson is grateful it didn't derail her music career. But she's been open about how the film made her feel exploited and how it taught her to protect her brand fiercely. Sometimes, she said, you learn the hard way what yes really costs. Next up, we close this countdown with a role that won an Oscar but left its actress wishing she could give it all back. Mira Sorvino, disowning the work, not the award. In 1996, Mira Sorvino's performance in Mighty Aphrodite earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Directed by Woody Allen, the film was a quirky comedy with heart, and Sorvino's portrayal of a sweet but street-smart sex worker lit up the screen. The role changed her life. It opened doors, elevated her status, and made her a respected name in Hollywood. But over time, that golden statue began to feel like a weight. In the years following her Oscar win, Sorvino, like many others, remained largely silent about the man behind the camera. Woody Allen was long admired in the industry, but also long shadowed by allegations of sexual abuse made by his adopted daughter, Dylan Farrow. For decades, the industry looked the other way. But in the wake of the #MeToo movement, the silence finally broke. Sorvino was one of the first Oscar-winning actresses to publicly apologize for working with Allen. In a 2018 open letter to Dylan Farrow, she wrote, "I am sorry for turning a blind eye. I believe you." She expressed deep regret for participating in a project that, in hindsight, made her complicit in a system that had protected a man she no longer felt comfortable supporting. She didn't just disown the filmmaker, she distanced herself from the performance that had once defined her career. The award, the accolades, the praise, none of it meant as much as standing up for what she believed was right. "I can't take the movie back," she admitted in an interview, "but I can be honest about how I feel now, and I do feel regret." For Sorvino, the regret wasn't about the role or how she played it. It was about who she played it for. It was about recognizing, too late, that success built on silence isn't really success at all. Her story reminds us that not all regret in Hollywood comes from personal failure. Sometimes it comes from hindsight, from growth, from the painful realization that the people we once admired were never who we thought they were. And in that realization, an award can start to feel like a mistake. Behind every famous scene, there's a story, and sometimes a deep regret. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Hollywood deep dives, and let us know in the comments which moment surprised you most. We've got more untold stories coming, don't miss them.